Hey, FlimsyLunchTray here, and welcome to World of Warships for our our Saturday edition video of our upgrade commander build video on the Tier 10 French battleship, the République. It's very hard for me to focus right now because I am so caught up with the most amazing Northern Lights award display we've had in over 21 years. So many of you have been seeing a lot of pictures online and Facebook, but it was a magnificent geomagnetic storm last night in Earth's atmosphere to see a lot of beautiful aurora colors. So I'll probably share some pictures. We'll do like a lunch line video on Monday or Tuesday. But with that being said, you're here to see more information about the Republic and get my thoughts and opinions when it comes to the ship. As discussed in yesterday's video, the Friday highlights, I talked about the playstyle and positioning of the Republic and just kind of what makes her special, and some different things going on with her compared to other Tier 10 battleships. She used to have the fastest reload time with her main battery in the game, but I think Rhode Island beats her out now, so she's second in the game in terms of reload. So, what type of battleship is the Republic? Is she a sniper? Is she a brawler? Is she a mid-range battleship? Republic is like the definition of a mid-range battleship. It's hard for me to think of another battleship that probably fits that positioning style better than Republic. I mean, of course, there may be some others Tier 10 considerably close, but that's mainly due to these 8 17-inch guns that have relatively poor vertical dispersion and poor horizontal dispersion. So it requires you to get more mid-range with these guns in terms of flanking with your positioning. But the ship overall is a very fun Tier 10 battleship to play. So mid-range is typically what I refer to as being that 12 to 15 kilometer window. When we build into full conceal, I think we're 14.1. I reset the commander because there's a 1-point skill that I've not used when I was going up this line, so we'll walk through that together. But yeah, basically that 12 to 15 kilometer window, especially when you stay outside secondary brawling range of other enemy battleships. You know, the dispersion not so great at long range. You'll get lucky sometimes, as you saw in yesterday's video. We were touching some Montana 23 kilometers out, I think. And then other times it's just, not so great. But let's go ahead and talk about the armor. One of the things that is definitely a weakness for the Republic is her armor scheme, because she is coated in 32mm plating, aft, in, stern, side plating, all of that. 32mm, except 19mm on your superstructure, which it's not massive, right? But it does take up some real estate. As you can see, it's just covered with AA, and also the secondary batteries there on the ship. But you're not so resilient against HE spam, since you get the larger HE calibers on cruisers. I think Des Moines pins 34mm, right? So you get pinned everywhere by Des Moines firing 203mm at you. So we start taking some things away. One of the things that the Republic has beneath on the armor belt, she does have a 400mm armor belt, a turtleback armor scheme protecting her citadel. So that is nice to see as we take more things away. 32mm on the deck, and then you have a 150 on top and 170 where the barbettes to the turrets sit. So you do get some more decent armor scheme beneath that 32mm plating, helping protect the citadel. But then once you take away, you can see the citadel is just a ball above waterline. I was thinking bulkhead, but just 40mm. So it's not impossible to sit a Republic, but the turtleback armor scheme does help you. In addition, you can see it's a bit of that spaced armor scheme going on there between the 32mm to the 400mm of the armor belt. So the last thing we want to touch on is the guns. I'm going to be talking about this for something of a first upgrade slot, upgrade 1 slot, that I don't always talk about, which we'll get there. But you do have pretty strong armor in the front of these turrets, 590mm, which drops to 350 to 330, and then 255 to 240 across the top. At the rear, you have 330. So your front of these turrets is definitely the strongest. I mean, especially when we're looking more at the ship. I don't know if it's too distracting with the camouflage. Let me just go ahead and pop that off for you guys, so you can maybe see the ship just a little bit better. Yeah, you can see a little bit more of what's happening on the ship. It's not just all coated in that silver coat. But you do have to show a pretty decent amount of side to get the rear turret off. Doesn't have really good forward firing angles. So, typically, unless a battleship catches you out or a heavy cruiser, your turrets are pretty safe in general, but I mean, they're your bread and butter. But, you have a decent artillery going on with your secondary battery as well with these 127 millimeters, so something similar to the Marcel, and then your 152 millimeters up here on top. And that's like really close. All right, let's go ahead and continue on, taking too much time with that. First off, let's just talk about the modules. So with the main battery mod 3 in the 6 slot, we have a 21.1 second reload time. So that's second best in the game. I don't know when you start comparing it with Rhode Island, like how close they are, which there's another skill to talk about or upgrade there to talk about. But it's a very fast reload time for 8 17-inch guns. One of the perks, I would say, of this reload time is your ability to punish broadside. You just reload faster than most other battleships in the game. So, a cruiser's like, hey, he just fired, and now the shells just hit me, so now I'm going to go ahead and turn broadside and angle out. What he may be thinking of a 30-second reload time or 28, realistically, you have 21.1 second reload time before you start taking things into account, like adrenaline rush as an example. You do have a pretty hefty 180-degree turn time. This is because we don't have main battery mod 2 here, which would help our turret traverse time. We also take a nerf with the main battery mod 3 at negative 13%. But because we set our commander skills, we don't have grease the gears on the turret traverse, so we will be able to get that down further. Your HE shell damage is 6,300. Your maximum AP shell damage is 14,500. So typically, I'm really only firing high armor piercing with these guns. I will switch to high explosive when dealing with destroyers and submarines, of course, but otherwise, typically armor piercing. But if you have an angled target, then I would say use high explosive, because armor piercing can be pretty disappointing when dealing with angled in battleships. Your hull, you have 92,400 hit points, so rather robust survivability. Actually, they max it at 100 in terms of the stats rating, if you will. You have 11 secondary turrets, 23 AA mounts. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on. You have a 26.1 main battery firing range, which, as I talked about in the Friday highlight, is really fun to punish battleships and cruisers, even an aircraft carrier as an example, when the match has just started. I have been rather trollish with this, and I like that longer range, even though you don't have amazingly accurate guns. I mean, we're helping the accuracy with aiming systems mod 1, but it's still quite satisfying, in my opinion, to start the game off to already just instantly jump into action there. Propulsion, you have 220,000 horsepower. Your maximum speed is 30 knots. We can get a little bit faster here with the Serum Mike flag, which is going to bump us up to 31.5 knots. And then with our engine boost here, it's a plus 8% engine boost. So in total, we can get up to 34.02 knots top speed here on the République. So, I mean, yes, there are other battleships that go 36, 38, push past 40 knots. But it is nice to have the engine boost to get you around the map a little bit faster. Probably be a little too OP if they put it like a 20% engine boost on here, but it'd be really fun, right? Continuing on, let's go and talk about the first slot. Now, standard-wise, I would recommend just going with the main armaments mod 1. This is reducing the risk of your main battery becoming incapacitated by negative 20%. Main battery stability plus 50%. Main battery repair time negative 20%. Now, in randoms and asymmetric battles, other game modes I've played, I've not had any issues with my main battery being incapacitated thus far. And we talked about that strong armor scheme on the front of your main battery turrets. So there's something I'm actually rather considering if you want to make a coal investment that I don't always normally talk about here, but I'm trying to keep my mind more open to this special upgrade, and that's the Damage Control Party Mod 1. This increases the action time of your damage controlled party by plus 40%. So right now, our action time is 15 seconds. So if we times that by 40%, then you're going to go into a 21-second duration on your damage control party. And kind of the reason why I think a little bit more of this is when we were talking about the armor scheme here on the Republique. You know, you're covered in 32mm. So you could build in a little bit more in terms of your survivability if you were to take the damage control mod 1. Now this is without spending a coupon, it's 17,000 coal. With spending a coupon, it's 12,750. So if you have the coal, then I would suggest look into this. If you're running this on your Republique, you have one now. Would love to know your thoughts in the comments. So I'm probably going to be mounting this on at some point. I don't know if I'm going to necessarily do it in this video, but I think it's something that's definitely worth flexing here on the Republique as I get to know the ship more and more. And you don't need a magazine mod 1 because this reduces your risk of your ship's magazine detonating by -70%. If you're playing ranked, randoms battle, clan battle, you just take the Juliet Charlie combat signal, which completely eliminates the risk of your ship's magazine detonating. Now, you do have a pretty decent AA defense 85. You'll definitely punish tier 8 CVs, tier 10 CVs kind of okay, then super CVs even more difficult. So, you know, not too concerned about taking the Auxiliary Armaments mod 1. I think I've seen some people do a secondary build on Republique, but as I pointed out in yesterday's video, I'd rather do that with like Ohio, Georgia, Preußen, Schlieffen, Prince Ruprecht, you know, more the secondary brawling battleships, where the armor scheme just, you take a lot of punishment quite fast in Republique with that 32mm armor scheme that completely covers the ship, and you don't have any hydroacoustic search, so on and so forth. But you can check out some other WoW's content creators, which I think have covered that. And the third slot, if you're just going to spend credits, then take the Damage Control Systems mod 1. This is going to reduce the risk of catching fire by -5%, risk of flooding -3%. If you have the coal to spend, then I would say make the investment on the Engine Boost mod 1. This makes your engine boost duration almost 4 minutes long. We're just 6 seconds shy of that with 234 seconds. And this is very helpful to getting around the map. So basically you pop one off at the beginning of the game pretty much because you have about 2 minute cooldown time. So if you get through all three, then that's a pretty long match, right? But I like building into it. It makes a lot of sense, in my opinion, here on Republique. And the third slot, there's two options. The first you can see right now is I've taken the Aiming Systems mod 1. This reduces your maximum main battery shell dispersion by -7%, and you get a slight buff to your secondaries. But I put on the bottom right corner of the screen what your horizontal and vertical dispersion changes to with this versus without, with on the top, without on the bottom. Just because I would like to get these guns to behave just a little bit more. I mean, you have that, what did we say that? 21.1 second reload time. So if I can get these guns to behave just a little bit more with their horizontal and vertical dispersion, for me that's a win. Otherwise, you may be definitely leaning more towards the main battery mod 2, improving your main battery traverse speed. So I'm going to see what it looks like with the grease the gears on our up commander. I think it gets it down to like around 34 seconds, I think, because right now, you know, 41.4 is definitely painful, but we're going to get that down with our commander, but we'll compare and talk about it. If you were going for a secondary build on Republique, then you'd want secondary battery mod 1. In terms of the fourth slot, I have been running the Damage Control System mod 2. Fire extinguishing time -15%, flooding recovery time -15%. This is just to do again with that desire for a little bit more armor here on the Republique. You know, make those 92,500 hit points last a little bit longer. I believe that's what it was, 92,400, excuse me. But there is another option to consider here on Republique, particularly because you have that engine boost to help you with the propulsion. This is something I think I'm going to want to test out on Republique, Now, of course, it's always up to you as a player. This is just my recommendations. This isn't saying you can only do this build. But this is something you could definitely look at running here on Republic. Like, I don't normally run this on many battleships, like on Schlieffen I do, as an example, because you get the fast damage control team. But I think Republic has the ability to do well with this upgrade, in my opinion. But for now, I've gone for a little bit more of a traditional route with the damage control system mod 2. Now, with the 5th slot, Concealment Systems mod 1. So, Republic has a pretty poor base conceal among the tier 10 battleships in the game. So without this, you're like 17 kilometers, or a little bit, maybe even actually a little more than that, if you don't run the concealment systems in the 5th slot. So we do definitely want to get that down. So right now it's 15.7. We're going to get down again when we put some skills on our commander, and detectability range by air is 12.1. And then you get that slight dispersion of shells fired by enemies attacking your ship, plus 5%, meaning they have slightly worse dispersion when firing upon your ship. Otherwise, I really wouldn't consider these other two. And like maybe if you're doing a secondary build, then I would say Torpedo Lookout System would make sense on Republic, because, you know, it doesn't make sense to be really running concealment so much, so to speak, with a secondary build, given that Republic has such a terrible base conceal, you know. With Schlieffen, of course, run Consumables System mod 1. But something to just kind of throw out there if you're thinking about a secondary build Republic. Not that I necessarily recommend. The 6th slot, there are 2 options, well, maybe 3, we can talk about. The standard one, I would say here, is the main battery mod 3, which reduces your main battery reload time to negative 12%. I think it takes us down from 23 seconds, if I remember what the base reload is. And your main battery traverse speed is negative 13%, so you take a nerf on your main battery traverse speed, so that kind of contributes to that 41.4 seconds right now that you're seeing. But this is great for that reload time, being at 21.1 seconds, as I talked about earlier, punishing the broadsides of battleships and cruisers who think they have enough time to turn out, or a destroyer, like we kind of clapped Frank Friday, or that's going to be the Johnston when it officially hits the game. So yeah, there is another contender here, being the unique upgrade that you would acquire from the Research Bureau. I believe I'll go ahead and click on it. I can't remember how much they cost. I think they're 19,000. Yeah, 19,200. And here you can see the main battery reload time is negative 18%. So you go from a negative 12% to negative 18%, meaning we're getting our reload time down even more. I'll just go ahead and do the math on my phone here. Oops, I'm doing it wrong. 0. Yeah, it's like a 19.8 second reload time, I think, is roughly what you have. But you take a big nerf on that main battery firing range. Your main battery firing range, which was 26.1, then ends up going down to 19.8 kilometers. So, you know, like the Montana you saw me clap at the beginning of the video yesterday when we started, I wouldn't have been able to do that. You know, I already had like 30, 40, maybe it was almost 50,000 damage just starting the game off, just because I could lob shells and punishing the battleships that were trying to go more broadside to me to go to their respective flank on the other side of the map. So that makes this a little bit more questionable for me, just because I really like that. There's another example, I didn't have it in the video because it's a different battle, where there was a Hindenburg was pushing up in a div. He was beyond 19 kilometers. And I felt bad, kind of felt filthy, but I was harassing him in his spawn as he was trying to push up with his destroyer player, because we had a CV spotting him, you know, CV spotting, that's great. And again, I wouldn't have been able to do that. I whittled him down to almost death when the CV, I think, took him out. So yeah, so that's something that I wrestle with, even though this is definitely a mid-range 12 to 15 kilometer battleship. That's where the ship's going to shine overall. I think maybe even Malta was beyond, I don't know if Malta was beyond 19 kilometers when I shot and killed him in yesterday's video either. So I wrestle a little bit more with this unique upgrade, just because I do like that reaching out and clapping enemy ships, because I think the horizontal dispersion is the worst and vertical dispersion isn't as bad if I get those two right in my head. And then if you're doing a secondary build, you could talk about Auxiliary Armaments Mod 2. Not that I would necessarily recommend it, because I think if you're going for a secondary build, meaning you're brawling, you're getting close, then you're probably actually really looking at this skill first, and then that skill, just to get these 17-inch guns like clapping a lot more. So I'll talk about a secondary build on Republic, because I think overall, if you're doing a secondary build, these two would run out. Probably this one first, because you're not really playing. You're not so worried about shooting targets beyond 19 kilometers, right? You want to get the enemy ships within secondary range. I'll go ahead and put it on the screen now if I remember to. If you did do a full secondary build, how much range would you have with your secondaries? Alright, I'm taking too much time here. Armament, high explosive shells, reload time 21.1 seconds. You have a 48% chance of causing a fire on a target. So my advice is, you know, if you're dealing with a battleship that's angled in towards you, just go ahead and use your high explosive on him. The AP is really frustrating for some reason on battle and targets with Republic. I've just had very frustrating time with that and dealing with any battleships. You know, then you can use high explosive against destroyers, and of course submarines as when you're able to. You pin 72 millimeter, and these have 840 meters second initial shell velocity. Your armor piercing, still the same, 840 meters a second. Maximum damage, 14,500. So these are pretty hefty hitting AP 17-inch guns. So normally I'm typically always firing armor piercing, except for when I'm shooting with against an enemy sub, destroyer. If I have high explosive loaded in those instances, otherwise I'm just going to take the shot if I know they're about to go dark with armor piercing, of course. Or you're doing an angled bow and battleship, then you're just trying to perhaps set them on fire with the high explosive. Depth charge airstrike, 11-kilometer range. You get 2 bombs and a payload, 2 available flights. Very helpful in dealing with subs. Your maximum bomb damage is 4,900. So really good to see that 11-kilometer range here. Not something like a 5 or 6-kilometer range that some of the other tier 10 battleships have. Not too many have that, but there is that. Consumable-wise, damage control party. We talked about bumping this up to over 21 seconds if you were to take the damage control party mod 1, which I think has some possibility here. I'm going to talk about this with the commander build as well. Cooldown time 80 seconds. Engine boost 234 seconds. Cooldown time 120 seconds. Repair party plus 462. Action time 20 seconds. Cooldown time 80 seconds. If you're playing ranked random clan battles, then you'd want India Delta, which is going to bump you up to 554 HP per second. And then I like to run November Foxtrot on my Republic. So now my cooldown time is from 80 to 76, 120 to 114, 80 to 76 in these respective fields. Otherwise, the other combat signals I'm running, typically this is what I would be running here. We bump up our AA defense from 85 to 87. A little bit more, oops, wrong one. A little bit more damage. So if I take this away, you can see 373, 1680 to 392, 1764. If you're doing a secondary build, then I would run something. I would just swap these two out. Commander-wise, this is going to be pretty. The first build I'm going to show you is the standard. This is what I'm going for with Republic. Originally, when I was going up this line, like with Alsace, Richelieu, and the others, I had Gunfeeder, but I've literally hardly ever used this skill here on Republic in the games I've played between randoms and asymmetric battle. Just because they're 17-inch guns, with the armor piercing, you overmatch 30 millimeter armor scheme, so then it doesn't really feel that I need Gunfeeder as much. Where like with Alsace and them, they were running 380 millimeter guns, and you only pinned over 26 millimeter. So you pin a lot of cruisers at the high tier with having 17-inch guns. So I don't really recommend Gunfeeder so much here on Republic. Of course, your mileage may vary. There's 2 others. 1-point skills I would recommend going for. Now this would be the emergency repair specialist. damage control party consumable cooldown time, -3%. Repair party consumable cooldown time, -3%. So what you will see here between these two, you know, when you're running a November Foxtrot, you're going to see these drop down to, I think, around 73, 74. And then, yeah, probably about the same here. So when you're kind of building into that, and then you talked about doing the damage control party mod 1, there's a little bit of synchronization. So damage control party is lasting longer, and you're able to get your cooldown time that much shorter. So that's part of my thinking here and going with this emergency repair specialist. Otherwise, then I would say preventive maintenance, because this used to only reduce the risk of your modules becoming incapacitated, but Wargaming buffed it not too long ago, where you're also improving the survivability of your secondary battery in AA mount survivability. So if you're going for a secondary build, République, then you would want to go for preventative maintenance, in my opinion here. But for myself, we're going to be going with emergency repair specialist. After that, we're going for grease the gears, so that, let's see, we said it was a 41.4 seconds. It's going to reduce down to 34.5 seconds. Much, 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 much better here to be able to do that. So that's just a pretty definite skill you need to take, especially if you're doing the aiming systems mod 1, I believe it was, mod 2. This guy, yeah, mod 1. Since you're not going for main battery mod 2 to help with that turret traverse speed. So I'd do that. And then for a 6-point build, I would go for the Adrenaline Rush. Get that reload time down even faster. You know, in yesterday's video, we were in the 20. I think we got down to 19.8 a little bit. So why not build into that reload time as you lose hit points? Because as this skill works, enhance the ship parameters for each 1% of HP lost. So main battery reload time reduced, airstrike armament reload time reduced, secondary battery reload time reduced, and a slight buff to continuous AA damage. After that, I would probably go for fire prevention, because your concealment is just so bad. Fire prevention reduces the risk of catching fire, and the maximum number of all fires on a ship is reduced to 3. Risk of catching fire is -10%. And then maximum number of fires is you take 1 away. So if you're nearer to World of Warships, basically without fire prevention, you'd have 4 fires on your ship, bow, stern, and 2 on a superstructure. Fire prevention, instead of having 2 fires on your superstructure, only 1, which means you're building into your survivability. You're ticking less damage because most HD spammers, they're going to be going for this midsection of the ship, right? It kind of it juts out, especially as you in this midsection of the ship. So you're going to improve your survivability overall by building into that. So I would do that. And then probably be next looking at taking the Concealment Expert. So you go from 15.7 to 14.1 detectability range by sea, and then from 12.1 by air to 10.9 by air. So, you know, this is a mid-range battleship. If you go for the, I would say, the quite favorable but traditional standard build here on République, then I would definitely say go this route. It makes the most sense. When I'm saying this is a mid-range battleship that plays best between that 12 to 15 kilometer window, then you get to choose when you want to go in and out of concealment. Now note, your main battery your main battery firing penalty, you know, that lasts, your concealment blooms up to your max range, which right now for our build is 26.1. But your reload time is 21.1 seconds if you haven't taken any damage and you have Adrenaline Rush, right? So then, assuming that you're dark for 1.1 second if you're constantly firing. So you don't have that, maybe that breather, that 5, 6 to 10 second window like other tier 10 battleships do if they have more closer to a 30-second reload time. So that is something you're going to want to pay attention to. But one of the reasons why this is nice is if you need to disengage, you need to go dark, you need to heal up, then the concealment, in my opinion, makes a lot of sense to take. And for me, it's helped overall, especially if you're starting the game out and you're trying to do what République does best, and that's being a flanking battleship, not playing a mid position in the map, but flanking either side. And that earlier positioning is really important, especially at the high tier, where you, if your detectability range is really bad, a lot of enemy battleships, you know, you're seeing last Satsumas, Vermonts, Georgias, Montanas, Yamatos, Musashis, you know, the list goes on. So there's just a lot that can punish you pretty bad. So it helps give you a little more stealth in the early on positioning here is also. For a 18-point build, then I would say go for Emergency Repair Expert. Your damage control party consumable action time goes up by plus 10%. So then that will take you, we'll look at that here in a minute when I've mastered this build. And then you get, you have an infinite amount of damage control parties, because it's not the fast damage control team, which you get limited of. Your repair party consumable action time goes up by plus 10%. And you get 5 heals instead of 4 heals, which also is quite nice to be running here. And then the last thing I would say is go for the basics of survivability. This reduces your module restoration time, or improves it, I should say, by negative 15%, and you're putting out fires and floods 15% faster as well. So this is a pretty standard battleship build. You know, typically you'll see something like this, or you might see gun feeder if it's more applicable for said battleship, or you see preventive maintenance here instead. But this is a pretty straightforward and standard build, and Republique is a pretty straightforward battleship in terms of her mid-range playstyle that she has. So if I was going to do a secondary build on Republique as an example, I'll just show you. Probably be something like this, because now you are getting your secondaries out to 10.5, and then if I come back into here, we'd be taking this. So now it's up to 11, and that doesn't even take into account our secondary battery mod 1. So what did I just say? It was 11? Yeah, so you can get some pretty long-range firing secondaries, but I think I pointed out earlier in the video as well. But for a secondary Republique, I would go for this. Again, I don't know how much necessarily it makes sense to run here on Republique. The other thing I would say, you could be a bit trollish. Instead of going for the manual secondary battery aiming, is I would drop that and go for close quarters combat. Whenever you get within secondary firing range, battery firing range of an enemy battleship, your reload time is going to drop down by negative 10%. So this is a bit of a surprise, and being able to get that down. So then you're looking at an 18.99 second reload, and then if you were to take the 6-slot unique upgrade, right, we add another, we take another 6% off, which would bring us down to 17.8 seconds. And then, you know, that's not even talking about losing any hit points if you had Adrenaline Rush activated, also reducing reload time. So you could be running 17-second reload time as an example with Republique, which just sounds filthy, but you sacrifice, you're sacrificing a little bit more of your survivability overall. So that's what I would say. I would probably be looking at this, or if you really want the more accuracy with your manual secondary battery aiming, it'd be kind of a toss-up between these two. So if you want a secondary battery Republique, let me know in the comments, as I think myself and others would be pretty interested to what how is it going for you? It's basically what I would say. But pretty standard Republique build, I would say go for this, in my opinion. Now you can see how this is also going to impact our damage control party now. It's 73.7 second cooldown time. Our consumable action time also is 16.5. That's something I didn't mention, because when we take the emergency repair expert, we are extending our action time on our damage control party. And you keep hearing me talk about this skill, right? Plus 40%. So now if I go 16.5 times 1.4, now we have a 23-second damage control party action time. So that's kind of the mentality of how these skills, between the upgrades and commander skills, all kind of have a nice synchronization there. And then our cooldown time on repair party, 73.7, and we've gone from a 28-second action time to 30.8-second action time. So there's just a lot of things that work really well overall, all said and done in my opinion. So I think I will be running this skill at some point on Republic. I just need to make the coal investment for it. But this video has gone over more than what I like it to. I'm sorry, I try to keep it within 30 minutes, but a couple additional things that I did want to take into account here on Republic. So with that being said, if you liked today's video, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, give it a thumbs down. Subscribe if you do want to see more. If you're subscribed, thanks so much. I appreciate it. And thank you, as always, to my Patreon supporters. Until next time, take care.